Hey y'all, iRick Sky here, and I want to talk about my recent decision. It was a tough decision to make, and that was, should I downgrade from the A7R2 to the A7 III, which I'm filming this video with? Should I downgrade to take advantage of the better battery life and the greater amount of autofocus points? So it was a tough decision to make. And after using, and again, I've used the A7R2 for several years, but after using the A7 III for only a few days, I've quickly discovered that it wasn't a downgrade after all. And let me explain that. So on paper, the A7R2 is a 42 megapixel camera. On paper, the A7 III is a 24 megapixel camera. There's a difference there. But you've got to keep in mind that, and this is where I was kind of in the dark, that's going to come into play if you're doing, say, a landscape photo. Let's say you take a photo and there's a tiny object, let's just say a boat or something small within that entire photo, and you want to go in post-production and zoom in on that tiny object like a boat or whatever. In that scenario, the 42 megapixel will be beneficial. But in most scenarios, 24 is perfectly acceptable. For example, if you look at the A9, the very expensive Sony Alpha camera, it's only a 24 megapixel. So is the A7 III. Now the A7R3 is not it's a 42 megapixel, but it doesn't have all the autofocus points that the A7 III has. So what I thought was a downgrade by going from A7R2 to A7 III actually became a very significant upgrade. A few things that I want to point out, and again, this is just a few days into using the A7 III. Number one, when I look at the photos, when I look at the videos, that HDR, that high dynamic range, is noticeable. And you'll notice when you look at your photos and your videos, it's like, man, these look a little bit better. What's this, what's different? I'm using the same glass, the same lenses that I used with my A7R2. What's different other than the camera body? There's a lot of new tech within this camera that people don't necessarily take into consideration. One of the things that I've found that I've really loved, and maybe this is present now with the A7R2 after an app update or firmware update, but what I can do with the A7 III that's absolutely incredible, and I'm doing it right now, let me see if I can get this on the video for y'all, is I can use, yeah it is, I can use this app. Let me walk back here and see if y'all can see it. So I'm using the Play Memories app. A common misconception is that the A7 III did away with apps. Well, they don't have the apps in the camera like they used to, but this feature right here with the Play Memories app, I'm paired with the A7 III right now while I'm filming this. But what's cool is that I can go in, I can adjust my aperture. I'm at an f2 right now, but look, I can go all the way up to an f20 if I want to. Look at that, see the background's no longer defocused. I'm doing this in real time from the app. So it's like a way to, especially if you're a one-person film crew, it's a way to pull out your phone and not have to deal with having a more expensive and less convenient to travel with field monitor, that sort of thing. This not only functions as a field monitor, but it functions as a way to manipulate your aperture while you're filming. Now see, I can confirm now I'm back in, well, let me step back just a little bit. I'm back in a suitable location for this face on video segment. So that's one of my favorite features. Now again, that may be functionality that they added within Play Memories app with an app update or firmware update to the A7R2, I'm not sure, but it was never there when I was using the A7R2 for the last time a few weeks ago. So that is major. Being able to do that, travel small, travel lightweight, confirm I'm in the camera's field of view. But the biggest thing for me is, like right now with this face on video segment, thought I saw something over there in the wilderness. With this face on video segment, I'm using autofocus. That was unheard of with the A7R2. So what I would do with the A7R2, and you can check out my videos, it was a great camera. I got great 4K video quality, but you would notice that I wouldn't walk around a lot. And that's because I was using a shallow depth of field. And if you're not familiar with depth of field, this right here is an f2, using a 25mm lens for this. Check the link within this video's description, you can find that lens. But f2 aperture, which is somewhat shallow, but by using autofocus, if I want to move closer to the camera or further away, I can do it and this autofocus should maintain pretty good autofocus. And not only does it do pretty good autofocus, but I found that the autofocus on this thing is just absolutely incredible. Look at that. I'm looking in the viewfinder to make sure I'm staying in the frame here. But I mean, even with that somewhat shallow depth of field of f2, this thing is just, with the increased number of autofocus points, this thing is just rock solid. And that in itself, since I'm primarily a video guy and I shoot 4K, everything I shoot's in 4K, this thing will do 4K. It eliminates me having to do the manual focus thing and, you know, and pace off how many feet I am and calculate, okay, well, I'm using this aperture, that means the depth of field is so big or whatever, so if I'm using a shallow depth of field, maybe I've only got that much room to, you know, to move forwards or backwards. And if I'm holding an object in my hands that I'm talking about while I'm filming the video, using manual focus becomes problematic. But see, if I used autofocus with the A7R2, it would get wonky. It would do focus breathing. Because what was happening is that the autofocus on the A7R2 wasn't as advanced as the A7III's autofocus. So you would see that focus breathing, which, to create a professional video, that made the video, in my opinion, unprofessional. So the only real option with A7R2 to get rock solid professional video was to use manual focus. But again, in situations where someone is doing, where they're filming without a film crew, that becomes very problematic. If you got to confine yourself to using manual focus. So this eliminates that hurdle. The battery life on the A7 III, absolutely incredible. I've been using the same battery all day, and keep in mind I bought a second battery, but I've been using the same battery all day. It hasn't given me any problems. So this video, the video quality, the photo quality, the overall build quality of the camera is exceptional. It's got a touch screen. There's so much more I'll go into, but for now, I'm going to close with this and say be sure to check the link within this video's description. You can find the A7 III, A7R3, the mic, the 25mm lens I'm using, tripod, and a whole lot more. Thanks for watching, and y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, iRickSky here. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. It's viewers like you that enable my channel to continue to grow. Thank you.